You're listening to Inclusive AF with Jackye Clayton and Katee Van Horn.
And here we are, episode, I don't know what episode, so that's
the next episode.
Ready for the next episode. We've been singing, so I might have to hold up. Hey.
I love it. By the way, we will do, Katee has met Snoop Doggy Dog at some point.
Yes, we'll have to discuss my sweet friend Snoop, yes.
But today we're talking about something even more exciting than that.
First off, though, welcome to the Inclusive AF podcast. I'm Katee Van Horn.
And I'm Jackye Clayton. Welcome.
Welcome. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for stopping by. So, are you an Oreo cookie eater?
I love Oreo cookies, but let me tell you the caveat. I like the thin ones.
Okay.
I do not like double stuffed, too much filling.
Yeah, no.
But I do love Oreo cookies. I think they're just easier to eat. I like the little ones. I also am a liquor twister. I'm not a full cookie eater, but the thin ones, I love the whole cookie. Yourself?
Yes, I like the regular ones. I do not like the ones that are like vanilla. I don't like any of those other weird flavors. Not so much. Not so much. I will, however, the ones that they do around the holidays that are like the chocolate covered ones.
I'll do those.
I can get on board that train. Yes.
Yeah. I have had, they have weird flavors, but I understand. But the tradition,
I get it. Yes. Marketing, product management, whatever it is. If you want to go ahead and make some other stuff, go ahead.
But I am a fan
Jackye
of America's most favorite cookie, the original Oreo cookie.
Oreo.
But this past month, they did something very cool. It's not really a commercial. How do you explain it? It's kind of it's almost like a piece. It's almost like a video, just a statement.
Yeah. I think it's a visual statement, if you will. A visual, what is it called when you are like support, visual like support, or hey, we're a part of this conversation. And I think it was very touching. And I think for a lot of folks there was crying. I think you were one of the people. I'm going to admit that I may or may not have. It cannot be confirmed by anyone because I was alone. So that's perfect. But the commercial or piece was basically about the fact, like, how do we create inclusive spaces at home for children? So,
well, I'll read this thing that I found an article that I think encapsulates it, in a way that we'll add the video, we'll connect it, or at least add a link so you can see the video, what we're talking about. But basically they did it in partnership with PFLAG, which is Parents and Friends of Lesbian and Gays, an organization to help the LGBTQ plus community, their families and allies. And the video is called Proud Parent. And it features, I didn't know they had names, but it features Amy and Jen, who visit the latter's, who's Jen's folks for the first time. Initially, Jen's dad appears uncomfortable with his daughter's relationship, but it's hardly a spoiler to reveal that in the end, he sees the light and honors Jen and Amy in a special way. And it is touching. I was bawling. Me and my daughter grabbed the Oreos out of the pantry, even though we knew they were stale, and we took one bite and away, but we were hugging and bawling. And then I watched it with my husband. We were bawling and crying. And I think, P.S., she was the product of an interracial relationship. There was also the scene where her brother comes home, or her sister, I don't know, with their family. They were more accepted than the gay couple. It was a lot in that commercial.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even just, they're unpacking the car and the neighbors looking over in kind of a judgmental way. But that, the end kind of scene where he has painted the rainbow flag on their, white picket fence, literally white picket fence. I think that was just so cool and so touching. And I think this is something that comes up quite a bit for folks who have children who their sexual orientation or identity is different than what they expected. And so it is that, how do you have the conversation? How do you come out to your parents? How do you, as a parent, make sure you're not accepting them with caveats? Because I think a lot of times what people say is, I love you no matter what. And it's like, well, no, just love me. If you're the child. And so I think that part is the message was beautiful in my opinion. And I just thought it was really cool. However, I think there's been some backlash from different groups, and there's some questioning of whether this was kind of a performative act by Oreo to kind of jump on a bandwagon of some sort. They've had parents or mom groups that have boycotted. There's all kinds of things from kind of every different side. And so I think we just want to talk about that a little bit and kind of talk about that performative allyship, performative support, whatever you want to call it, and how that impacts brands. But then also, the other comment that I've heard is kind of it's too little too late. And I don't accept that, because I think
it's never too late.
Come to the party whenever, and we will welcome you, because we want this acceptance. We want this openness. So
I will say something. For me, the irony, and I did not introduce myself. Hey, we have to start doing this, Katee, on every episode. Like, I'm Jackye. I'm a Black woman. I have no hair. I'm really cute. 47 years old with cute glasses, for those that may not be able to see us. Because we talk about things like everybody knows that I'm Black and that my husband's white and that I have kids, and we forget about those things. But for me, it was not performative in that was like it felt like my whole life right there. I do have a daughter who is in a relationship with a woman. I'm not going to classify it and say she is or they are. I haven't had a formal conversation, and it's in the beginning of this relationship. Mm-hmm. We also, in my family, we were both raised in a very conservative Christian homes, my husband and I. My mother-in-law, who lives next door, has very conservative beliefs. Like, she calls us if Hannah has songs on her Instagram and is like, oh, this happened or this happened, very conservative. There's always a question of things with your children when you have them. But my husband is king of, like, I'm just wondering, just putting things out there that can be received in a really negative way, because our kids are 20 and 17. Mm-hmm. Like, I asked my son if he wanted to take a jacket with him to the football game on Friday night, and got, a little pushback. So kids
How dare you?
Right, like, get a sweatshirt. He doesn't sound like that at all, by the way. But,
no.
And so when I looked at it, it didn't feel performative. It felt like my life. It felt like my life
right.
I could feel me trying to be warming and welcoming, and my husband being warm and welcoming in his own way, but not when things are difficult, it is hard for him to give to those things. And so it was hard. I mean, there's other parts in it that the things that stood out to me personally, let me just say that really quick. So the things that stood out for me personally about this ad was that obviously something that she was concerned about when she was just getting into the car and going there. She was concerned about it. But she still went on with her life, which I thought was interesting in the video. And the only thing that made me upset personally, because I'm a marketer's dream, like, I fall for all of it, is when they showed them as children and her playing with her dad eating Oreo cookies, is when I lost it. I was like, oh my God, we did that with our own child. And I think there is something that if you didn't have a child that was in a same-sex relationship and you come from an interracial relationship with, like, freaking racist conservative neighbors, maybe it felt a little over the top. But for me, it felt like that could have been yesterday. That could be Thanksgiving this year.
Right.
P.S. We don't have a fence. He's not painting any fences. But I could also...
Your husband is at Home Depot right now getting paint.
Probably. One day I will have to invite him onto the show because just become friends with me on Facebook. It'll all become clearer then. But what stood out to you? Was there anything, did you feel any kind of way? I mean, like, you're kind of coming from the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
You know, you're white without having children, fan of the Oreo, but not dealing with those same things that stand out. Like, what stood out to you as someone with a clearer frame of reference?
No, so obviously, yes, you're coming from a little bit more of a subjective because you're living it.
That's okay.
For me, it actually was that same scene of seeing the dad and the young girl, and that was more because my dad passed away, and so like anytime a commercial goes there, I'm a train wreck.
Right.
So,
but you still have those moments, right? Like you
absolutely.
Can remember.
Yes. And also like the growing up and it wasn't the acceptance of a same-sex relationship. It was just an acceptance from my dad. And that meant everything. And it was like the worst thing that he could ever say wasn't like, hey, you did that and you did wrong. It was, I'm disappointed in you. Mm-hmm. And so that was like the tone that also came across for me was like she felt like, am I disappointing my dad by being in this relationship? And then for him to be like, no, you're awesome. And I adore you just as you are. Like it was beautiful. And we need to stop talking about it.
You're going right now. I feel like you're right. I think it talks a lot about meeting people where they are.
Yes.
Because I've always talked about people coming out. The people that I've met in my life had some type of turning point moment where they knew about their sexuality, usually somewhere between like 2 and 6, where they just knew something happened between preschool and first grade where they knew and started you see more currently you see more people talking about it, being open about it and being nurtured and embraced. But back in the day, they didn't just acknowledge, they also knew they felt like it was wrong. Most people thought that it was wrong. So they've been struggling with this thing for 20 years, and then they tell their parents.
Right.
And they have 20 years to work up to this moment. Mm-hmm. And I think as a parent, you don't have 20 years. I don't have 20 years of picturing how this moment was going to be. Right. And so from that perspective, it was a little performative. If there's like, I just know that somebody said, we're going to go home for Thanksgiving and hopefully we're going to have this moment. And the dad was like, so, and just walked off. Like,
right. Absolutely.
Painting.
Yes.
There's no cookies involved. There's no hugs involved. There's no welcome to the family involved. Yeah.
Yes. And I think quite honestly, for folks of our generation, if you will, that scene and the way it played out was not in any way, shape, or form how their own experience went when they came out to their parents. And so I think that's the other piece that kind of struck me was, and it's actually something that kind of came up. Have you watched Schitt's Creek?
No, but everybody
Oh my gato. You need to start watching it immediately. But the one character, David, is sexually fluid, I guess is probably, I don't know what the right term is. But he sleeps with a woman on the show, and then he ends up getting married to a man on the show. And I love the way that they did this. And it actually, that he talks about it in the kind of the making of video that they have on Netflix now. And it was basically the fact that we never had the horrible coming out story. It was just like, this is who you are. And so cool, whatever. And I think that's the piece that so many people nowadays as parents struggle with is for kids. It is like, okay, well, why is this even a big deal? Like, I love who I love and cool. And I think there is so much more fluidity about it that it's not a big deal. So,
but I think and that's why it's like, I think we need to remember, and we are inclusionary AF, right? So it's like, just remember that there are multiple people in the scenario. And the funny part later, after we were able to spit out the stale cookies and dry our tears, my daughter did bring up, she goes, and the next scene was her mom coming out pissed off because he freaking ruined the fence.
Painted
Like,
the fence.
where was that scene? Um,
reality bites.
yeah, because I was like, my daughter, we had the moment. She was like, "Oh no, 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 no!" Like
Where the HOA comes and gives them a ticket.
Right, a fine, right? And then everybody's out like, "Ha ha!" They're all repainting the fence back. Like, so there is that. Come on, give me a break. But the part what was beautiful is seeing that they were able to come together, and it wasn't. He didn't say, "Welcome to the camera," or "Welcome to the family," in those type of words, and the painting wasn't really great. And then he said, "Did I do that right?" Oh my God, I'm gonna cry. So did I do that right meant like he was trying.
Yes.
This is as good as I can do. Is this right? Because I want to be able to celebrate you, but he didn't have to say, "I fully am down with the pride shirt, marching, doing this whole thing," because he just wasn't there yet. Like, this was the first step. You felt like this was the first step in their relationship. And it reminds me of it's a difficult balance when you're inclusionary, because we like to say, "Oh, everybody's the same," but then everybody's different. For so long, people tried to put everybody had these assumptions, which goes to the bias. Like, we didn't realize we all have different messages, different journeys, different things that we were raised with. And so when you put all of these people together, you have to take a moment to pause, to say, I love the idea of people saying, "Let's find out." Like, people say, "Let's see how we're the same," when actually we probably need to spend more time finding out how we're different and trying to embrace and understand and learn and knowledge about those things.
Right. And so I have two comments. When he asked the question, like, did I do that right? The part, like, the way that I interpreted that also was like, I don't know what I'm doing and I need help.
Yes.
And that felt so cool too, because I think as parents, especially with your children, you want to be like the one who has all the answers and I know all the things and I'm the one. And for him to be vulnerable and say, like, I don't know how to navigate this exactly, but I'm trying to do the best I can.
Yes.
Like, that was really cool in my opinion. And then I think the other part that you're mentioning just about the, oh my God, I just lost my train of thought.
Oh no. Meeting people where they are.
Oh, so thank you. That was like another piece of just like when you're having the conversations, an activity that I love to do with groups is have them, get into a group of 3 or 4 folks or whatever, and do that exact thing. Like, what are the 3 things that you have in common? What are the things that you don't have in common? And have them think about that stuff, because there is that correlation between, like, hey, we are all different. We all have different things that we bring to the table. But there are so many things. I mean, even just, talking about this commercial, there are things that you and I, from a different perspective, had a different take on it. But it was definitely wow, this touched me. And here's why. This touched you because you're living it. This touched me because I'm thinking back to my relationship with my dad. And so I think that's also like, that's good marketing to me, when you can touch kind of everyone and everyone can have a relatable moment to what it is. But also, like, as humans, I think we need to do a better job, if we truly are going to be inclusive, to say, wow, Jackye, you and I have things that are not in common. But also we have a lot that we have that is very much in common. And how do we celebrate both of those things?
Now, there's something that I love that goes into it. They have, along with this commercial ad, whatever we're calling it, they had education guides that go along with it.
Yes.
The first one was going home, which is the beginning of the segment. The second one was LGBTQ people of color, right? The third was negative reactions. And the fourth was family affirmation. And so it's great that people can get around this, and it talks to what we're talking about. It breaks it down of some of the messages. And the fact that they did all of that in 3 minutes, we were like, that's a lot in 3 minutes. Without a word, with one sentence.
Right.
Like barely a sentence. and other moments that you could just feel. And you're right, because they did what we talked about. They met us where we are and allowed us as an audience to interpret all of those things
Right.
similar ways. Now, Katee, the part of the reason that we do this podcast is that me and Katee talk a lot, and we're like besties and talk a lot with other people in the same field in HR and diversity and in recruiting and things like that. But I also watch a lot of trash TV, and
Yeah. Let's talk some Real Housewives now.
yes, me and Katee both watch those shows. So, but I would think about it about 90 Day Fiance is one of my favorite, and they was 90 Day the other way. But there's a 90 Day Fiance, and the man was coming from Turkey, and she had kids, he doesn't have kids, blah 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 blah. And the reason that it's so important to study these things and not say, oh, we're in love, we're just the same people and we can all move forward and come from just a heart place and not a mind place, is because their coming home story, they weren't going to get to go home because she's not supposed to have kids, right? And then but you're looking at the show and thinking you're supposed to get married within the next 90 days. And you haven't had this conversation. Like,
right.
Some of these things don't make sense. And so it's important to not ignore some of the other things that go along when you put different cultures together. You know, like that whole snippet from that commercial could keep going on for days. We haven't met the other girl's family yet.
Right.
Like, lots of things.
Right.
In the regular series. And I feel like there's so much, again, and you know, just take the time to try to find what's different and then what's interesting so that you can continue. I keep hitting this thing. I am so sorry. So you can continue on your, you know, as you're going through. The part of it is the fun part is learning about somebody else's culture and learning about other people.
Yes. And I mean, you know, I'm a weird travel person. I shouldn't say weird. I love it. I love traveling. I love going to places and learning stories and cultures. And so I recently went to Jordan, not recently because, you know, COVID, but last year went to Egypt and Jordan. And while we were in Jordan, the tour guide was telling us, would tell us these stories that were just absolutely amazing. And also slightly terrifying. And as I think of myself as a US female single, I wouldn't exist there in this form, and not that that's bad or good. That's how it is. And so one of the things that they talked about, and I think this happens and is kind of the standing joke in when you go to spring break in different countries and you fall in love immediately. And that's, 90 Day Fiance has had a few of those exact, they're on their mission and fell in love, or they're, whatever. And so it's always interesting to me to hear these stories of people that have fallen in love in a week or in a few days or whatever. And then you start to think about the cultural differences and how that will impact your actual life. It's if you're not honest about what your needs are, if you're not honest, and we can go into relationships now too, you have to actually talk about who you are as a human. And so, I always, again, put myself in the shoes when they're telling these stories. And I was thinking, yeah, I could never live in Jordan and live in my husband's family's home and have to wear certain clothing and have, and not be able to be with any other men alone, or, all of these different rules and cultural norms, which they just have grown up with.
Yeah.
And so it is just interesting because it is that there's no, that's wrong and they're horrible people and they're lower or lesser. That is different. And that's different than what I'm exposed to. And that's different from what I can see for myself. Whereas that just, it's not like oh, wow, this is horrible and we're, being kept down. It's just, this is the culture. This is what they do. So that's also just a fascinating point. And going back to the commercial, it is that, for parents, they have a vision in their head when, they have a little baby in their arms or they're bringing home from the hospital of what that person's life is going to be like. And when it's not, the terror from a parent of, I never want my child to have any harm come to them. and I never want anyone to be mean to them or anyone to anything. And to know that the hardship or the toughness of what they might be exposed to or might have to go through, I know for a parent that is terrifying and on it. But at the same time, you want them to be happy and you want them to be free to do whatever they want. And so, I mean, I think this goes, we can, if we're ready to start talking politics. Well, so just so you know, we are recording this on November 1st. So we are 2 days away from the most important presidential election of our lives. We just had Amy Coney Barrett was just brought into the Supreme Court this week. And I like, people have said, oh, she's conservative. What's the big deal? Blah, blah. And I just am thinking about like friends and family members that this will impact greatly. The legalization of marriage, the abortion rights. And I say abortion rights, it's not even abortion rights. It's females having the autonomy of their body.
Right.
And being able to decide what they want to do, whether that's birth control, whatever it might be. So
I will say, and something that also happened this past week. So little baby Trump, not little baby Trump, little baby girl Trump, what's her name?
Melania?
The youngest.
Oh, Barron?
No, the girl.
Ivanka?
No, there's a
Tiffany.
Yes, not
I'm like running out of people here.
American normal name. Her. I'm always like, what? Ivanka, and you have Donald.
Well, Ivanka's because her mom was Ivana.
I know, but I just feel like it's Ann Tiffany.
And then there's Tiffany. Marla Maples.
Yeah, that's true. Well, yeah, Tiffany's about right. So she went for the LGBTQ for Trump.
Yes. Yes.
And took out the T, but she added the IA. So it was very interesting because it was like, most people forget about some acronyms at the end or the plus at the end. The T's right there in the middle. She knowingly took that out of her conversation. And it is, I don't know if I thought it was smart or I thought it was really crappy, because we know that they took out, they will not allow trans people to serve in the armed forces anymore, which was like shocking. Like that's your sign where it's like, they're literally taking people's rights away. They're literally taking someone's livelihood away, their job choice, their livelihood, our protection. Like they would rather take these people out of the military than have people who are openly and wanting to serve, so that they, because of their identity was horrible to think about. I was like, how can you just take the T out of there? I mean, I've even known as a diversity professional, I had one person who was not a client, but potential client, ask me to not talk about the T specifically. And I was horrified. I was like, you can't have it both ways. And I refused. But so the election is the most important. We don't know what's going to happen at this point. And I don't know. It's going to be funny whenever this episode comes out. It could be like freaking January and it's already happened. But I'm terrified. I'm really terrified about what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, so I did see that Tiffany moment. And I think like, even before that, I'm also like, the Trumps don't in any way, shape, or form support the rights of anyone in the LGBTQA plus community. And so like to even have that as a rally, like was also just, it kind of threw me off, to be fully honest. Right. But I think the other piece is we can go back in history and talk about all of the different groups. So I just had the opportunity this week to go to one of the museums in town. It's the Heard Museum, and they are dedicated to highlighting Indigenous peoples from North America. And so they have all kinds of just amazing artifacts. And they most recently just started this I forget the name of it, but basically it's like the beadwork of these women that and men who have basically made these. They're not the Kachina dolls, but it's these just amazing gowns and things like that, but for a doll. And so it's the beadwork that takes them like 4 years to complete. But then there's this other whole section about the Indian schools, and I'm using Indian school because that is the language that they used for these schools. And you read some of the history of those schools and what actually occurred. And then also, speaking of that, then like all of the males were encouraged heavily to enroll in the army during World War II, during all of these wars. And so it's also that, when you talk about the trans people not being able to be in the military any longer, the service that anyone in the military does for our country, to make that choice, to put their life on the line, all of those things, to have that be like, nope, sorry, we don't want you. Like, it's so difficult to process and such a hard pill to swallow. And I think we heard that when the ban came up, that, so many of the folks that are transgender that we're serving were like, I've served this country for X amount of years, and now I'm not good enough, or, and I'm not a real person. And it's just so reminiscent of how we historically have treated anyone that we have decided is less than or other or whatever you want to call it historically in the US. And it's gross.
It's disgusting. But I also think something that is worth mentioning is how we keep getting, because of how like vicious and blatant the current administration is, it is desensitized us. It is horrific, where, because trans people have served, it was always like this don't ask, don't tell kind of situation. And then gays in the military were allowed. And now they said trans people cannot, like, period, done. And we're seeing things where they're taking the rules. I mean, Trump, he hasn't actively supported what he had said, what he was quoted as saying for LGBTQ marriage, people in the, like, or for gay marriage specifically, had said, well, it's a law, there's nothing I can do about it. Like, I'm just going to support the law. Like, he didn't say, like, are you against it? He's like, well, it's the law, so I'm just going to be able to do it. And that's why it's so scary when you think about the transference, not transference of power, but we'll get to that like next week. But when you see that, you have this over, that was me knocking on wood.
Yes.
So when we look at how the situation, about the Supreme Court justice, of thinking that if you make it a law, all of a sudden it's okay, there's a lot of laws that are just not, that we might need to review.
Right. Oh, if you go into any state, like into their actual statutes and laws, you will probably be blown out of the water. I encourage anyone listening to go and do that. Look at what laws are on the books in your state. And I would specifically look at things that, being gay would be one of them. I think it's also like rights of women. If you look at the laws that are still on the books about what women can and cannot do, I mean, in the state of Arizona, and I don't know if this is still true, but I know very recently this was true, that there was like a law on the books that no more than like 2 women could live together. And it was because that would be considered a brothel. And it was like, okay, so like that was a thing. And so I think there's just a lot of outdated laws on the books, but I do agree with you in that, like, the commentary from administration around, well, it's the law, we're just upholding the law. And it's like, okay, well, sure, but that's not okay. And I mean, and we can apply this to all of the insanity that has happened since 2016 in kind of every facet of our lives. But I agree with you, like, it's just not even a big deal,
right?
Some of these things anymore, that, that he does, like, we just talked about this before we started recording, the convoy of Biden and Harris's convoy getting an escort through Texas by Trump supporters who basically came and front and in back and on either side of their bus hovered, slowed down the convoy.
They were terrified.
And scaring people and threatening harm, whether you want to admit that they were threatening harm or not. Doing that is a scare tactic, period.
Well, I mean, and especially like we have open carry laws.
Mm-hmm.
We have
Same here.
carry,
Yeah.
And yeah, we live in 2 of the greatest states in the United States. Anyway, so
there were guns involved in every one of those trucks that was surrounding that bus. There was a gun.
There was a gun in every single one. And the gun, like, sure, you're taken aback. If you're a Texan, you might have gone, oh, y'all are so stupid. But if you're coming and like, that's a threat. That's a terrorist threat. If it was any other place, if you landed in Canada and you were surrounded by people with guns, that would be a war. That would be a war cry.
Well, and I think you and I have talked about like in any country.
Yeah.
In any European country, that would be a declaration, absolutely, of hostile takeover, whatever you want to call it. And then for Trump to go and like tweet it and be like, I love Texas.
Yeah, you know what?
It makes me want to cuss. And I promised you I wouldn't cuss on this podcast.
Said this was good for children, so I'm not going to say it. Yeah. I just am going to say, like we say in Texas, them's fighting words. Exactly.
Right? Yes, absolutely.
So, but what is also interesting is they were going to Austin. They were in Austin. They flew in Austin, and that's where the thing was. They ended up canceling the votes. What's funny is, since I live in Texas, I know they wouldn't be doing that in Dallas, and they wouldn't be doing that in Houston. They sure as hell wouldn't be doing that. Sorry, kids, because I'm sure we have a huge youth audience.
Hey, you never know.
They wouldn't be doing that in Houston, because there's a higher population of Black people in Houston. People don't know there's a very low population, African-American population in Austin. And to threaten that, the problem that I have with it and what makes me so upset is that people don't see that and say, wow, maybe we shouldn't support Trump. Like, maybe that's bad. Like, maybe he's a bad person.
Right.
And that's why I get afraid of the election. And that's why it's like all of a sudden it was like, oh, that's why we don't say things like that. This whole time we've heard about like, oh, you're so liberal, or you're just trying to be politically correct, and we shouldn't have to be politically all correct all the time. Yeah, we need to, otherwise we might kill each other, turns out.
Right. Literally.
Did you see the guy at Buttigieg was speaking in like Iowa, like no, Tampa. Okay. He was speaking at Tampa in an open speech on Biden's behalf, and there was one Trump guy. We have to put all these links. There was one Trump guy who cut him off and walked in front of him, and it was a Gays for Biden rally, and was screaming with a poster saying to vote for Trump, and talking about people and wearing half a mask and yelling. And the thing that was the most beautiful were there were people that were trying to like take this guy down, basically remove him from the scene. And Buttigieg was like, no, isn't it great? We have a president that will fight for both, and he has a right to be here. So just let him go. And the dude was like, yet again, it was another example of, why is this even happening? This would never have happened, some other administrations. But in all fairness, we do have to go back and look at the things that we accepted, even during some of the things that happened during the Obama administration, that right now, when you look back, like, oh, okay, so what happened that kind of took us down the slippery slope? I thought he was great as a person. I can't say I agree with all of his policies, but then going back even further, you look at Bush and you look at Clinton, and there's another book that's called, I forget the name of the book, but it basically talks about how we have desensitized ourselves as Americans, and how we've started accepting things that we would never accept as a culture. And so
Right.
that's why it's so confusing. It's like we have to rebuild our culture.
Mhm.
It's either going to be in a week or it's going to be in 4 years in a week.
Amen. And I think, well, we will see what happens in the next couple days. I think everyone is in a wait and see mode and with terror in our background and concern about what might happen on Tuesday and not even on Tuesday, but probably, the weeks after that, regardless of who wins. And yeah, I mean, I think I think something I read, and I can't even remember where I read it, but it was that gun sales and toilet paper again, because gotta always have toilet paper,
Right.
have skyrocketed.
And Walmart has taken them out of their stores.
Toilet paper or
well, toilet paper does it by itself. Walmart took it out of their stores. They started
all of them, like even BB guns.
Girl,
I'm just saying.
Keep talking.
Yes.
I'll find out. I will find.
Please let me know. Okay, so let's wrap this one up. Okay. If you're cool with that. So
wait.
Oh, beg your pardon.
Walmart returning guns to sales floor. Sorry,
there you have it.
That happened for one day. And you were saying.
Yes. Yeah, I was gonna say Walmart's not gonna do that.
They did for a day. I'm sure it affected things.
Totally stops people from buying guns on a Tuesday, but they did go
Oreos.
back and buy them on a Wednesday. So it works
Oreos.
out.
I
need some. Yeah. I think Jackye and I are going to go eat an entire container of Oreos and a gallon of milk after this episode. So Jacqueline, tell me what is your one takeaway that you want to make sure folks got from this episode?
I want them to meet people where they are. Understand that we're all kind of in this together. We know some of these things are systematic in a belief system that maybe was molded when we were one age. And as we go through it, things have changed. And just meet people where they are and remember that everybody has a journey that they're going on. And so it's time to, try to listen, try to open your heart. That was 35 things. My one thing turned into 35 things, but just meet people where they are when you're sharing information.
Awesome. Thank you. My one thing would be that we are going to have a link in the description of this episode with resources for PFLAG for parents that are helping through, as their children are coming out or as their children are sharing, who they are. And they're great resources that are out there that can help you as a parent to kind of navigate it, because you want to make sure that you are doing the right thing and being accepting and realizing that this is probably different than what you expected, but that's okay. They're your babies and you're going to love your babies and got to keep loving them. All right. Well, this has been episode 6 we're going with of the Inclusive AF podcast. This is Katie Van Horn.
And I'm Jackye Clayton. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
I'm waving.